Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old-timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey, y'all. Welcome to this week's show. First of all, I want to wish you a very happy Independence Day. This is such a special holiday for those of us in the United States. I think maybe we've begun to take it for granted. I was out earlier in the week and I drove past some old cemeteries. They had the markers for the Revolutionary War soldiers, and it really made me think about everything that, our ancestors, well, I guess I can't speak for everybody, but my ancestors certainly sacrificed for, and the fathers of everyone's country, I guess. I had several ancestors that served in the American Revolution and the War of 1812. Took 2 tries to finally make the British leave us alone. I will never understand why some people seem to worship the English. When I turn on the news and they're talking about some royal wedding or, something the Queen said, I turn it off. Anyway, I guess I'll move on to another subject, but just remember on this Independence Day, I don't like just to call it the 4th of July. I think it's too important to call it the 4th of July. Just remember on this Independence Day that the men who signed the Declaration of Independence, including Charles Carroll, the only Catholic signer of the Declaration of Independence, I'm not directly related, but we'll claim kin, they, most of them lost everything. I mean, the British came in and burned their houses, killed their children right before their eyes, and tried their best to kill every one of them. It was no light matter. It was no light matter at all. And also remember the Over Mountain men who, from the little Sycamore Shoals community, right between, it was called the Watauga Settlement, actually. It's right on the edge of modern-day Elizabethton, heading toward Johnson City. The British sent word up there to a bunch of trappers and mountain men, demanding that they pledge their loyalty to the crown. Well, you don't do that to a bunch of hillbillies, do you? A bunch of Scots-Irish. They got pretty mad about it, walked on foot, mostly barefoot or in moccasins. Some of them had horses, walked all the way from Tennessee to Kings Mountain, North Carolina, and with, the most primitive of weapons, defeated at that time, the greatest army in the world. And those should be our role models. I don't care what they're teaching in school now. Those should be our role models. And if we haven't learned anything from COVID-19, the emperor has no clothes. Our government cannot take care of us. It's up to us to take care of ourselves and our family and our health. That is what makes us relevant to this show. So moving right along and getting into what we're talking about today, we're going to continue our discussion on identifying herbs by their plant families. This helps you learn to identify the herbs in the wilderness, to get familiar with them. And we're going to talk about the uses for these herbs just very briefly. I'd like to cover 3 plant families today if I can. Last week we talked about trees. So even though last week's show was introducing my new book, which I hope everyone is considering buying a copy, it was medicinal uses of trees. Well, this week we're going to talk about, first of all, a very small family. I think I can move through this one quickly. This is the Aristolochiae, Aristolochiae, the Dutchman's pipe family. We're into botany in a day, and that's the book that I recommend everyone get to help them identify herbs. There are two members of this family, very easy to identify. I mean, you're not going to mistake wild ginger for anything else. It has low growing, it has sort of a mottled green leaf, and the flower actually looks like a small pawpaw flower. It's like this little alien plant. It doesn't even look real. If you find a low growing dicot plant with tubular flowers and parts in multiples of three, it's very likely a member of the Dutchman's pipe family. Now that differentiates from, say, a trillium, which is another valuable use for herb. It always has parts in three, three petals, three leaves, but it does not have tubular flowers. So remember that. Members of this family have either regular or irregular bisexual flowers with three united sepals, zero petals, and typically 12 stamens. All right, that's how you identify them. The Dutchman's pipe, it also has this extremely odd looking flower. And the reason it's called Dutchman's pipe is it kind of looks like a pipe. If you think about the calabash pipe that Sherlock Holmes used to smoke, it's shaped like a calabash pipe. And interestingly, calabash pipes were often made out of calabash gourds with a nice little meerschaum insert to keep the tobacco cool. Um, Still an incredible design. It just looks ostentatious, so a lot of people quit smoking them, but they're beautiful pipes, and it is a really nice design to keep the smoke cool. Cool smoke does less damage to you when you smoke it. The Dutchman's pipe is sometimes grown as an ornamental, so this is one you're going to see a lot more often than wild ginger. In fact, I've only run across wild ginger in the woods two or three times. It used to be a much more common plant than it is now. It was over harvested for a while because it tastes like ginger. I mean, it was an alternative to imported spices in the early days of our country. Um, Medicinally, the pattern of this family is potent volatile oils. The spicy nature of these plants warm the body and stimulate sweating. That means it's diaphoretic. I'm trying to define my terms. People have asked me to do that. There are a lot of words that only herbalists use, and one of them is diaphoretic. It means it stimulates sweating. That helps you break a fever. Warming the body naturally increases the flow of blood, so these plants are listed as having a vasodilator effect. Vasodilator means it dilates the blood vessels. Increased menstruation and uterine stimulation. Those words are emmenagogue, meaning increased menstruation, and oxytocin, meaning uterine stimulation, are direct effects of increased blood flow, hence the other common name, birthwort. Now, these should not be used during pregnancy. It could be very dangerous. The plants also have what's called an anthelmintic property, which means worm killing. Anthelmintic means worm killing. So in no way, shape, or form should these plants ever be used during pregnancy. So the Dutchman's pipe is used for infected wounds. The plant is described as bitter, diaphoretic, and vasodilating, as I said, used to stimulate digestion, sweating, and white blood cell activity. Tea of the root is used as an oxytocic to stimulate uterine contractions during childbirth. Caution is advised in using this herb, obviously. The root was chewed and applied as a poultice for snakebite. Very good to know. All right, Asarum, that's the wild ginger. Says true ginger belongs to the ginger family, but wild ginger is used similarly. It is often common in moist forests. Well, I don't think it's that common. Actually, I live in the area where it's supposed to grow pretty abundantly, and the only times I've spotted it are when I'm not looking for it. It's one of those things. It's a low-growing plant that kind of hides in the shade, but when you find it, it's a fascinating plant. The flowers are sort of a burgundy purplish color and just odd looking. Medicinally, it is a digestive stimulant, and like commercial ginger, it can be used to relieve stomach ache. There's also one that's found in Canada that is a wild ginger. It's called Asarum canadense. It's similar, and it's diaphoretic, carminative, expectorant, and irritant. There's a European species, Astarum europaeum, which is purgative and diuretic, but is considered too dangerous to use without supervision. So our native American wild ginger is probably the least dangerous, the most useful, and that's the reason it was just overharvested. If you can find some, or if you can get a few plants growing, it's a nice one you could put in a shady, damp area. All right, now let's get into the Berberidaceae, the barberry family. Now, I've discussed this one before, but it's so useful. I mean, this is one of the most useful herbs there is. There are only two members, true barberry and Oregon grape. What you're going to know this family is they got a lot of thorns on them. They're really spiky. Oregon grape has spikes on its leaves, like holly. Okay, the barberry has more spikes like on its stems, but the Oregon grape has spikes on the leaves like a holly. It says if you ever find an evergreen dicot plant with evergreen holly-like leaves and flower parts in multiples of three, then it is likely a member of the barberry family. The small yellow flowers are clustered together in racemes and mature into purplish, sour berries. Members of this family have two or three small bracts masquerading as sepals on the back of a flower, but otherwise are typically six true sepals, six petals, and often appearing in a series of three each. The ovary is positioned superior and consists of two to three united carpels, forming a single chamber. The best way to look for this family, in my opinion, is really by the spiky thorns, the spikes on the leaves or the thorns on the stems. And then you can look at the flowers, but I notice the leaves and the thorns first. But yeah, look for the flowers and make sure you know what you're doing. But I don't see how you could mistake an Oregon grape for anything other than a holly bush. And if it's got blueberries on it, it's an Oregon grape. Those berries are tart. I've developed a taste for them. My friend in Canada tells me they're very good to make wine. Most people prefer them as a jelly or a jam. Others can't stand them. If you don't have a taste for bitter, like Michael Moore said, it tastes like soap. Well, I actually think they're quite good, and I enjoy snacking on them as I walk. When you walk, you might get thirsty, and if you chew on something bitter, it increases the saliva, so it keeps your mouth from getting dry, and it gives you a few calories, and they're a wonderful liver stimulant. That is the primary use for barberry or Oregon grape. The various species of Berberis produce edible but very sour berries. The shorter species seldom produce berries, and I have seen these in the woods. The leaves are identical, but they are much shorter. But they are always a treat when you can find some, at least after you doctor them with enough sugar. The berries are excellent in jams and jellies and provide their own pectin. The very young leaves are also said to be edible. Medicinally, the yellow berberin. Now, when you dig one of these up, you're going to notice the root is yellow. Pretty much, I don't think actually is an exception to this. When you see a bright yellow root, that plant contains berberine. Um, Golden seal is the most common and overharvested. And so herbalists like myself are encouraging people to use Oregon grape or coptis, which is gold thread, in place of golden seal. And we're also encouraging people to grow golden seal because it really has been overharvested. In the mountains where I live, where people go out and dig up plants and sell them, like ginseng, people will shoot each other over ginseng. Uh, Golden seal and bloodroot are probably the two, next to ginseng, the two most often harvested. And yeah, they're overharvested. We need to be careful about that so we don't make these plants extinct. Berberin is a bitter substance. It stimulates the digestive tract, promoting gastric activity, bile production, liver cleansing, and acting as a laxative. I use Oregon grape in my digestive bitters that I have for every meal. Also helps with allergies. By stimulating liver function, it is considered a blood purifier, useful for venereal diseases like syphilis and gonorrhea, and also premenstrual syndrome. It calms a person by facilitating liver function. Chewing on the leaves may help acne. This again is a result of liver function. Berberine is so incredibly bitter, it stimulates the entire body and not just the digestive system. And I should say there, when we talk about liver herbs, I discussed this at length in my show on herbal energetics. You can either use a liver herb that soothes and calms the liver and helps with its function. That would be like dandelion root, burdock root, um, or you can use an herb that stimulates or excites the liver. The berberine in barberry, or anything containing berberine, is almost perceived by the liver as a toxin. It's so bitter that the liver thinks, wow, that could actually be poisonous. I need to jumpstart my activity and get this processed out of the system very quickly. If your liver is already exhausted, if you handle a lot of solvents, if you're a very heavy drinker, if you have cirrhosis, if you have fatty liver disorder and that is inherited, your liver could already be exhausted. And taking a berberine containing herbal formula could actually make things worse. So you always need to be aware of that. Michael Moore gives the example that it comes readily to mind of a client he had who was getting rashes, bad eczema, basically bad eczema, and bad allergies. And he couldn't figure out what it was. So we thought, okay, like any good herbalist would, I'll give him some barberry, and that'll stimulate the liver, and things will probably get better. It got worse. Turned out the guy had been working with industrial solvents and working as a bartender. Alcohol is a solvent, soaps are a solvent. So between the solvents he was using working on his vehicle to the solvents he was getting on his skin and in his body constantly, his liver was exhausted. So he changed him over to burdock and dandelion that calmed and cooled the liver, and the guy got better right away. Okay, so that's what we need to keep in mind when we talk about barberry. But that's not its only, by any means, is that its only use. Barberry is an excellent herb. Chewing the root is said to have a Novocaine-like effect on the gums. Also good for fevers and inflammation. But as an antiseptic, this is one of its best properties that most people probably don't even know this. Anything that contains berberine, the golden seal, the coptis, barberry, Oregon grape, is excellent for disinfecting wounds. I think it was Seven Song in his series on herbal first aid gave the example of puncture wounds. Puncture wounds are particularly prone to infection because something went deep into the skin. And when you're thinking about wound healing, well, a lot of people grab some comfrey because comfrey will close up a wound, facilitate healing quickly. But comfrey will actually close that wound so quickly, infection can form under the skin. It didn't get completely infected before it started healing over the top. So he recommends making a strong Oregon grape root or any, barberry root tea and soaking that wound first. Soak the wound, nice hot tea, soak it to get that wound completely closed up, completely cleaned out before you try to close it up. You can similarly use these roots. If you're in the woods and you get a cut, you get a deep scratch, if you really, if you're afraid of infection, grab the root, scrape the outside off with your pocket knife, chew it up real well, and then apply that like a poultice to the wound. It's going to really help prevent infection. And that's one of those, first aid survival tips that can literally save your life. Now, the only other thing I guess there is to say about barberry, don't combine it with licorice. Licorice root somehow negates the effect of berberine on the liver. The two just don't get along. Barberry has been proven useful against antibiotic-resistant bacteria. MHC, which is a compound found in Colorado's Fremont barberry, prevents bacteria from pumping the antibiotics, including berberine, out of the cells. That, again, is Oregon grape or barberry or mahonia. Mahonia is what barberry's official name is. Now, if we have enough time, and I think we do, I want to get into one last plant family for this week. This is one of everyone's favorites, the poppy family. And the poppy family actually includes some really interesting members. First of all, let's talk how do you identify a poppy? Well, you look at the flowers. The leaves are alternate and often have a milky sap in the stems. Most are herbs, but there are a few shrubs and small trees in warmer climates. The poppies have flowers that are regular and bisexual with 2 to 3 sepals, separate sepals, and either 4, 8, or 12 separate petals, plus numerous stamens. The ovary is positioned superior and consists of 2 or more united carpels forming a single chamber. It matures into a capsule containing many small seeds. Everybody's familiar with poppy seeds. Of course, the poppy family contains the opium poppy. We'll get into that in a minute, but it also contains a couple of useful plants that are not going to make you high or addicted, but can also help with pain and sleep. The prickly poppy is one. That's argemone. The seeds are edible like conventional poppy seeds, but if you eat too many, they can upset your stomach. The acrid plant juice is used for burning off warts, and a tea of the leaves or seeds is mildly narcotic. It is used externally as an analgesic wash for sunburns, internally as a sedative and antispasmodic. The other one in that category is the California poppy. This one is planted just about everywhere along roadsides. I mean, you can find some California poppy. You can grow these themselves. Both the prickly poppy and California poppy are legal to grow and use. According to the physician's desk reference for herbal medicine, I mean, there's no contraindication. Um, I'm sure if you really used a whole lot, you would get sick. That's true of any herb. But it says with standard doses, there are no contraindications. The California poppy, the state flower of California, it contains isoquinoline alkaloids. The tea is mildly sedative and analgesic, suitable even for children. Too much can result in a hangover, according to Michael Moore. The plant is said to be edible as a pot herb. So these are really mild, non-opiate poppies. Very good to know, very useful. Opposed to the regular poppy, which is legal to grow in the United States, but illegal to process and use in any way. The regular poppy, Papaver somniferum, is where we get opium, morphine, and heroin. They do have edible seeds that are used for seasoning, but minute quantities of opium may be present in some species. Flower petals can be boiled into a flavorful but medicinal syrup. It is slightly narcotic and sedative, hallucinogenic, and has vasodilator effects. The latex is also narcotic, and the potency varies from one species to another. So, like I said, legal to grow, illegal to use in any way, and always dangerous. But one that I mentioned a few minutes ago that grows in the mountains where I live is bloodroot. Bloodroot, or sanguinaria, contains narcotic opium-like alkaloids that depress the central nervous system. The plant root acts as an expectorant in mild doses, but is nauseating and emetic in larger doses. As a narcotic, the plant is sedative in effect, but can be fatal in excess. Bloodroot is used as an anesthetic and to dilate the blood vessels throughout the body, thereby improving circulation, helping the bronchioles in an infection, and stimulating menstruation. The plant should only be administered by a qualified professional. The fresh or dried powdered root is used to treat skin eruptions, cuts, nose polyps, warts, or slow healing sores. Bloodroot is used as an anti-plaque agent in Viadent toothpaste. The crushed root may be used as an insect repellent, but caution is advised as the alkaloids may be absorbed through the skin. And the root is also the source of a red dye that was used by Native Americans. That's why it's called bloodroot. When Captain John Smith came to America and the natives gave him a wife or two, they adorned themselves with a dye of red that was made from bloodroot. Bloodroot is a very valuable herb. Again, it's one that's over-harvested in the mountains because it's used in a lot of folk cancer remedies, especially for skin cancers, um, mole removal. I cannot advise it for that use, though many herbals do. Basically, people put it on the area they're concerned about, they cover it with a Band-Aid, they leave it on there, and it eats the tissue away. It has an analgesic property, which makes that not as painful as it would be otherwise. But, when we talk about cancer, You got to be very careful with stuff, and I'm not going to recommend that as a treatment for cancer. Fear that one may not work, or two may trigger the cancer to spread, to metastasize. Many people do swear by it though, and if that's something you're interested in, you're going to have to look it up for yourself. But also in the poppy family are the most interesting flowers, I think, the bleeding hearts. Bleeding heart is a very popular ornamental plant. It has a couple other members in the family. This is the Fumaraceae, the bleeding heart family. The bleeding heart is so called because it's basically a heart-shaped flower. The delicate flowers of the bleeding heart or fumitory family are always a delight to find. The flowers are irregular and bisexual with two scale-like sepals and four petals. The outer petals spread above the narrow inner petals. The flowers usually have 6 stamens in 2 groups of 3 on opposite sides of the pistil. May have 4 stamens positioned opposite the petals. The ovary is positioned superior and consists of 2 united carpels that form a single chamber. It matures as a capsule or a one-seeded nut. So the ones you might find are mountain fringe. This is a wildflower that grows from southeastern Canada into Tennessee. Very widespread, and you'll probably find this one if you're, you know, not too far south in the United States or too far west. There's Corydalis. Now, this one is widely used in herbal medicine. Species of Corydalis contains narcotic alkaloids of varying degrees, especially in the roots. The narcotic properties are used in the conventional ways for their analgesic, sedative, and antispasmodic properties. However, they can also be hallucinogenic and slow the pulse. So they should not be overused or misused. But the other thing that is really good about them, they dilate the bronchioles. So you'll often see Corydalis used to help with muscle spasms and lung issues. Some species have actually been used to treat Parkinson's disease. So it is a widely used plant. Just be careful with it and don't overuse it. The plant is potentially dangerous and should only be used by a trained professional. Now, Dicentra is the bleeding heart. This is the one you're going to see planted ornamentally, also called Dutchman's breeches. The Dutchman's breeches actually looks like a little pair of pants. Bleeding heart contains narcotic isoquinoline alkaloids, useful for nervous system disorders like paralysis and tremors, and as an analgesic to relieve pain such as toothache. A poultice of the leaves is used as a muscle rub. A tea of the root is reportedly diaphoretic and diuretic in effect. The plant may cause dermatitis in some individuals. So it's similar in use to the Corydalis, not quite as strong, probably a little bit safer to use. Again, just don't overuse it. And the other is fumitory. Fumitory is an herb with a lot of traditional use, especially in Europe. The fresh plant may be used to curdle milk. It's a plant they would use if they didn't have rennet to make cheese. It acts as a preservative and imparts a tangy taste while preventing a rancid flavor. The alkaloids in fumitory are used for their bitter taste to stimulate the digestive process. So that's wrapped up the bleeding heart family, 2 of which are really medicinal, one of which is really useful in the kitchen. And we've covered the poppy family, we covered the barberry family, and we covered the Aristolochiae, the Dutchman's pipe family, or wild ginger. I think that's enough for one episode. So y'all, get out there and enjoy the freedoms we have left. Don't take them for granted, and I will see you next week. The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.